Mike Gundy's new Oklahoma State coaching staff is maintaining a top 20 recruiting class with this latest edition, and some more crystal ball Cowboys potentially on the way soon.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we get to jump right into the conversation of Cowboy football and recruiting. Of course, we have been hovering between number 19, number 20, number 21 in the country in the recruiting cycle for 247. And with the latest edition, the Cowboys maintain that top 20 recruiting class, moving from 21 back to number 20 by landing three-star offensive lineman Sunia Vuki. Sunia Vuki comes up by way of Folsom, California at 6'5", 350 pounds. And I read a little article about him earlier. He got invited to do some private training with the Arizona Cardinals offensive line because just a couple years ago, he was 370 pounds. So obviously going down from 370 to 350 is potentially just to get more agile, mobile, and hostile. And hostility seems to be the name of the game with this young man. If you look at some of the film, we're going to do a film breakdown because there's an expectation of another commit to be happening somewhat soon. So we're going to do a film breakdown of those two together. But what I decided to do was look at some of the other services and see how they match up. And in that, I was going through On3 Sports and their crystal ball prognostications. And we do know that On3 sometimes has groundbreaking information, and sometimes they say stuff that is just completely off the wall. And this is one of them instances where I do kind of want to peek into what they are saying in regards to some potential Cowboys that could be coming to Stillwater here before too long. Now, we are going to do a top 5, the most excited about or best potential Cowboys on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But before we did that in a later episode, I wanted to take a peek at this. So if you look at On3, the top-rated player that currently has Oklahoma State in competition in their crystal ball is 4-star running back Ryan Estrada. Now, we just landed a 4-star running back in Katie Batman Jones, but this is a proud traditional university when it comes to running backs. The argument for RBU is a viable conversation, so you have to be able to continue to load up on talent. Ryan Estrada at 5'11", 190 pounds would accomplish that for sure. It seems as though we're in competition right now with Mizzou and some other players in the game, but Missouri, Oklahoma State are the top two percentages for where he would land, followed by Bama, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. I think another individual that Oklahoma State is going to take a heavy peek at that is involved in this potential Cowboy mix-up is Monty Martin, another running back, 5'11.5", 185 pounds out of Port Arthur, Texas. He currently is projected at 49% to go to Tulsa, with Oklahoma State shading right under at 43%. The next individual up on On3's possible next Cowboys is going to be Brandon Brown, a 5'8", 155-pound wide receiver out of Killeen, Texas. He has an 85.65 overall rating, and currently the prognostication has him with Oklahoma State in the lead, followed by Colorado State, Wisconsin, Washington, and Boston College. We're going to keep this thing rocking and rolling here because this is a pretty interesting thing to look at, in my personal opinion. The next Cowboy up that could potentially land in Stillwater's Parker Ord, the 6'4", 210-pound tight end from Frisco, Texas. And, we've had some success in the Frisco, Texas area. This would be the DFW pipeline that we can continue to lock down. This would be absolutely phenomenal if we were able to land this. Evan Goodwin. Now, there has been some things put out there that he's already potentially made a decision. Who knows if that's accurate or not. But according to On3 Sports, Oklahoma State is in the lead, followed by Mississippi State, Mizzou, Wisconsin, and Arkansas. Why does Wisconsin keep popping up on the same recruiting battles? When Arkansas pops up with guys we're going up against, that makes perfect sense. But seeing all these Wisconsin dudes, it's kind of intriguing, interesting. I don't know what the exact verbiage should be. But the next individual they have up here is Madatali Benjamin. He's a 6'6", 305-pound offensive tackle out of West Valley City, Utah. And anytime we have Benny Tonga out on the recruiting trail, we feel pretty confident that we have the ability to land that guy. But we are currently projected as second place. Nebraska is number 1, followed by Arkansas, Utah, and Texas A&M. Now, this is another conversation of Oklahoma State versus Arkansas and how it keeps popping up and how it does make a whole lot of sense. And geographically, of course, the fact that we get to play them, I think, is a good distinguishment between the two. The next potential Cowboy up that they have listed on here is going to be Colin Thompson. Colin Thompson is a 6'3", 210-pound defensive end, tight end, wide receiver. He does a little bit of everything in high school. He's projected to play defensive end at Oklahoma State if he were, in fact, to become a Cowboy. And the prognostication is very high here at 82% for Oklahoma State, followed by Baylor at 2%, Texas State, Pitt, and UNLV. Texas State does make some sense here. You're going to see there's some individuals like the offensive lineman that we just got that had Sacramento State in the mix there alongside Arizona and some other Big 12 schools. So it's not surprising when you see schools like Sacramento State kind of pop up on some of this nowadays. All right, the next individual after Colin Thompson that has a percentage by On3 is Ben Duncombe. Ben Duncombe is a 6'5", 250-pound defensive end out of Lake Travis, the Austin, Texas area, right in Texas's backyard. Obviously, this would be a fun get for us. We currently are in the lead at 39%, followed by Kentucky at 33.9%, Houston, Maryland, and once again, Wisconsin keeps popping up. This is absolutely wild to me. Yeah, if you can get somebody right out of Texas's backyard that is likely being under-recruited by Texas, it adds that degree of animosity that I think all of us can embrace and happily be a part of if he were, in fact, to decide to become an Oklahoma State Cowboy. We're not done yet. We still got a couple individuals up on here. Defensive lineman, another one out of Frisco, Lone Star, Texas. Shout out to our main man, Garrett Rangel, who also is from this area. Yes, he moved on to Virginia Tech, but it doesn't mean we cannot continue for this to be a pipeline. Mr. Christopher Knowles is a 3-star defensive lineman, and currently Oklahoma State is in the lead at 28%, according to On3, followed by Taco Tortilla Reckham Tech at 24%, KU, Michigan State, and Syracuse. From a positional standpoint, right, I like the fact that it's kind of all over the board here, and you get a decent understanding of where some of these guys are looking at and potentially what some of the competition could be. Yes, these crystal ball prognostications are not the end-all, be-all, but it's fun to take a peek. Another individual, 4-star safety out of Mansfield, Texas, Chance Collins. Chance Collins currently has Oklahoma State in the lead, according to On3 Sports, but it's very, very slight margins, right around the 19 or 17% range, followed by Texas Tech at 15%, Arkansas State, Michigan State, and West Virginia, according to On3. As we continue to go on here, I don't know if On3 is going to be like the end-all, be-all, but at the same point in time, I think it is pretty interesting to look at some of these potential dudes that could end up at Oklahoma State. The next one up at 94% is Dejon Gaines out of Union High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The 3-star safety, according to On3, 6'1", 180 pounds, has a lot of suitors, and this is an individual that I think a lot of us have been wanting for a long time. When you talk about locking down the state of Oklahoma when it comes to recruiting, this would be a pretty significant get. Followed by Kansas State, Houston, and SMU. The pesky SMU Mustangs keep popping up, just like the conversation between the ACC and the Big 12 keeps popping up. I don't know if I fully buy into all of it, but nonetheless, it is what it is. And then here's another individual that we have talked about before, Xavier Okufulize. Definitely probably messed that name up. He's a 6'5", 200-pound athlete out of Rejoice Christian, the Owasso, Oklahoma area. He currently is being projected to go to Tulsa over Oklahoma State, which is pretty interesting. But that opens the door for another defensive end out of the Fort Worth, Texas area, and Tucker Ashford. Tucker Ashford is 6'3", 250-pound defensive end that currently has Kansas State in the lead at 36%, according to On3, followed by Oklahoma State, Houston, Illinois, and once again, Wisconsin had to pop up in here. So according to On3 Sports, those are some of the potential crystal ball Cowboys that could lean this way or at least be in the mix to have a serious conversation about the Cowboys winning these battles. And again, Some of these individuals will be a part of the top 5 on the defensive side, top 5 on the offensive side. We'll save that for a little bit later on here because we do have to talk about Oklahoma State being top 15 in something. It's a little wild in my personal opinion, yet nonetheless, there's a respect factor here that needs to be earned and deserved in 2025. Speaking of earning and deserving, ladies and gentlemen, you have earned the opportunity to take care of yourself and have some fun with the NBA playoffs via FanDuel. With the playoffs in full swing, every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, whether it's game-winning shots or breakout players or just building a massive lead like the Thunder were able to do last night. FanDuel makes it easy for you to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on what player's about to heat up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? How could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement for your first $5 bet? Go to FanDuel today. It is the perfect time for you to sign up. If you head on over to FanDuel.com, you can place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get back $200 in bonus bets. Head on over to FanDuel.com today. Make every moment matter more with the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, so Oklahoma State is not going to be a top 15 team nationally. And top 15 is a little misleading, but there was a ranking of Big 12 teams put out recently, and I want to kind of dive into it. Obviously, spoiler alert, Oklahoma State was in the 15 range, and there's only 16 teams in the league, so I thought that was a little, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it's interesting to say the least. So let's go over on here. Speaking of On3, they're the ones that publish this. Let's go over what they have as the rankings for the Big 12, and then we'll kind of add our piece into here. Number 1, Arizona State. Number 2, Taco Recum Tech. Number 3, the BYU Cougs, followed by the Baylor Bears. The K-State Wildcats at number 5, the TCU Horny Toads at number 6, the Iowa State Cyclones at 7, the Rock Hawk Jayhawks at 8. They had the Utah Utes at 9 after a 5-win season. All right. Colorado Buffaloes at 10, Cincinnati Bearcats at 11, the West Virginia Mountaineers at 12, the Houston Cougars at 13, the Arizona Wildcats at 14, Oklahoma State at 15, and UCF at 16. Now, the write-up on Oklahoma State. The 2024 season was the worst for head coach Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. That led to an awkward offseason where there was a standoff over his contract and the potential that he'd lose his job. In the end, the assistants underwent several major changes. The roster itself is also turning over in this transfer portal, so it's a little difficult to say exactly what kind of team Oklahoma State is going to have in 2025. All of that may be accurate. But Oklahoma State below Arizona? No. Below Houston? No. Below West Virginia? Maybe. But they have quite a bit of turnover as well, and I don't know that everybody's sold on Nico Marchiol. 11, Cincinnati? Absolutely not. 10, Colorado? Okay, maybe. So worst case scenario, Oklahoma State should be hovering in that 10, maybe 11 range. Again, worst case scenario. Primarily because when you look at the track record of Mike Gundy, he responds after bad years. And more often than not, we're more productive in the seasons that were projected to be down. Right? We covered this from a betting perspective, right? Head on over to FanDuel. Make sure that you can cash in on what the Oklahoma State over and under could provide. Potential Big 12 champions could provide, just because the meat on the bone is so much that it's perfectly logical to take advantage of it. The underestimation of Oklahoma State is, I don't necessarily want to say expected after a 3-9 season, but this is kind of ridiculous to me. And the fact that Utah is number 9, and I know they have Devin Dampier coming in. Devin Dampier might be great at this level. He might not be great at this level, but Utah being this high doesn't make sense. Maybe perhaps the justification would be Kyle Whittingham. but they're not going to give that same favoritism to Mike Gundy, which does make a little bit of sense. You guys know that I've railed on Mike Gundy for some of the things that have happened. I've also made it a point that when he does something pretty awesome, we talk positively about it as well. And some of these rankings just don't make a whole lot of sense. So you're putting Oklahoma State down because they had a 3-win season without taking into consideration why that 3-win season took place. Talent wasn't an issue. You can look at the NFL draft, Oklahoma State tying the most in the Big 12 with drafted individuals because of the talent. The discrepancy between the talent and the coaching, yeah, that could be a viable conversation. That could have been in this article, but it wasn't. So why is Oklahoma State being viewed as the 15th team in the Big 12 outside of a 3-win season? I don't know. Todd Grantham is a proven defensive coordinator in the NFL and in the SEC. Of course, the third and Grantham thing was talked about yesterday. We went on the Voice of College Football, Big 12, with Clint Foster. Shout out to Reagan jumping in there. But in that conversation, we were just kind of trying to make sense of what the schedule could potentially look like and how the season could shake out. And it's like some of these individuals, we mentioned On3 sometimes does awesome stuff. Sometimes they have their head so far up their wazoo, it doesn't make sense. Mike Gundy not responding, kind of wild to me, because you have brought coaches in that do have successful track records in the conferences that everybody promotes as the bee's knees in everything in the SEC, plus the NFL model. Plus, you got to take into consideration that all of these individual coaches, right? The 3 offensive line coaches, the nickelback coaches, the 3 linebacker coaches, the multiple DB coaches. This is an NFL style of system. Does that mean every team in the Big 12 is going to operate this way? Maybe not. Colorado is. That's why seeing them in the top 10 potentially does make some sense. You know, losing Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders is going to be a little bit of an issue. Losing LaJohntay Webster might be a problem. Jimmy Hort Jr. might be an issue. So they did lose some firepower. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State brought in a ton of dudes. So this is, to me, just On3 not doing their due diligence to figure out why Oklahoma State had a terrible season and why the projections for this season should be much better. One of the biggest is the schedule, right? That's what we were talking about with Clint Foster and Reagan yesterday. The same reason I was telling people to hammer the over in 2023 was primarily because of the schedule. Last year, the schedule didn't set up super well for us, and we ran into some of the top teams in the Big 12. This year is a little bit different. We have Baylor at home. We have Kansas State at home. We have Iowa State at home. The 2 most difficult road games are going to be at Oregon and at Texas Tech. And at that point in the season, that late, I don't know if Baron Morton's going to be healthy. Right? If Baron Morton is healthy, Texas Tech, I think, is a phenomenal representation of what the Big 12 could be from an offensive innovation standpoint. The question for Tech is going to be the defense. But the question for this article ranking Oklahoma State 15th is, it seems kind of random. Right? Having some of the top teams up here, okay, I can get with that. Arizona State. I do think that Udall, that running back they brought over from Army, should be able to kind of fill in right where Cam Scadaboo left off. So if you want to have some question marks about Oklahoma State at the quarterback position or Oklahoma State at the running back position, sure. But simply saying that Oklahoma State's 15th in the Big 12 because Mike Gundy had to fire a bunch of people, I think it should be the exact opposite of that. Mike Gundy doesn't make these moves. He doesn't do these things. He doesn't fire his friends. He doesn't completely change the entire offense and the entire defense. He doesn't completely re-innovate the way that he's always done recruiting. These are all, to me, examples of Mike Gundy understanding that it is a new landscape. I mean, we're being much more active in the NIL department than we've ever been before. We thought giving Ollie, the O-lineman, and all the defensive dudes was a big deal. It pales in comparison to what we're doing this season. So should Oklahoma State be top 7, top 8? No, absolutely not. Not after a 3-win season. Not when we don't know what's going to happen at quarterback, or we don't know who's going to carry the load for the most part at running back, nor do we know what the offensive line is going to look like. So having question marks does make a whole lot of sense. But insinuating that Mike Gundy is just oblivious to how to correct this thing, again, it doesn't matter if the Board of Regents pushed his hand or not. The fact is, it got done. Casey Dunn was one of the biggest issues. He's gone. Charlie Dickey was a problem. He's gone. I love Brian Nardo. I still talk to him on a regular basis. I'm so happy he was able to scoop up Yamil Talib, but he wasn't living up to some of the expectations of the 3-3-5 when you look at Iowa State's compared to Oklahoma State's, or even portions of the season. West Virginia's 3-3-5 was pretty dominant. So I feel like the underestimation for us as a fan base is a good thing, right? Betting is fun. Making money is fun. And this is going to give us the opportunity. But again, more often than not, Mike Gundy responds in these moments. The seasons that we're not projected to do much is when Mike Gundy plays his best brand of CEO. And with this new CEO role, this should be a completely different team. The talent acquisition should be a different team. The recruiting in and of itself is proof that we are doing things significantly different. So I feel like On3 was a little lazy with this article. And I also feel like it might be a good thing for us that we're projected this low, but at the same point in time, you can be a Gundy hater. But to pretend that Mike Gundy didn't do a bunch of fairly miraculous things in the offseason is just missing the mark, in my personal opinion. Speaking of missing, Penn State might be missing out on the opportunity to catapult themselves above Oklahoma State if this final X doesn't go super swimmingly. So Oklahoma State's David Taylor gets to kind of keep this budding rivalry with Penn State going, with the final X announcing who the participants are going to be. And of course, this is going to be a pretty important deal for not only Oklahoma State, but just in general. All of these individuals are looking to have a spot. And in order to do that, this is their opportunity. And with that being said, the lineup is Spencer Lee versus Luke Lillidahl, Vito Arujau versus Oklahoma State commit Jax Forrest, Oklahoma State RTC coach and former Ohio State Buckeye Joey McKenna versus Iowa State's former dude Riel Woods. Then you have Yanni Diakomahalis versus PJ Duke, followed by Mitchell Messenbrink versus another Iowa State guy and David Carr. Then you have Evan Wick versus Levi Haynes. Unfortunately, Levi Haynes absolutely put it to Dean Hamady Jr. the other day. So, I would expect Levi to continue that through. Then you have Kyle Dake taking on Zahid Valencia. Of course, Oklahoma State RTC coach Zahid Valencia did defeat Kyle Dake a little bit earlier by an 8-4 score. So I expect this to be another barn burner. Followed by Josh Barr of Penn State and Trent Hidley. Then you have Kyle Snyder and Hayden Zilmer. Then you have Wyatt Hendrickson, followed by Trent Hilger. So 7 of these dudes are Penn State guys. 5 of these dudes are Oklahoma State guys, whether it be potential dudes or coaches in the RTC that are sticking around Oklahoma State. This matchup, I think, does show a little bit more animosity building between these universities. And it's kind of fun to see Iowa being left in the dark here. They're kicking and screaming and flailing to make sure that they're in this relevancy conversation. But after losing out on the Rainey Twins, the relevancy for Iowa is decreasing more and more. And I think this is yet another indication of that. Now, why this is important, because you have some Penn State guys in the coaching room that are going to be helping train some of these up-and-coming athletes. Likewise, you'll have the same thing at Oklahoma State. So losing Thomas Gilman, a lot of people feel like it might be a hindrance, but that when you pick up Coach Lee Roper and the other individual, Els O'Hare or whatever, I cannot pronounce his name correctly. My apologies. But when you pick up those individuals, I think it definitely does cancel out the loss of Thomas Gilman. More importantly is the competition, right? We'd had discussions before with Locked On Penn State Nittany Lions host, Zach Sako, that whenever you're looking at the budding matchups between Oklahoma State and Penn State, to me, the biggest metric of success is going to be in the wrestling room. There's going to be times throughout the course of the season that the guys in the room get more competition at practice than they're going to get in the duels and the matchups. That just is what it is. In order to keep your team constantly being able to score points and be better than the other wrestlers, the competition in the room and the training is imperative to that success. If Oklahoma State is going to catch Penn State next season, it's going to be because of this RTC program. So the amount of success they can have rolling around on the mat and freestyle to represent United States men's, that's pretty big deal. So if Oklahoma State has most of these guys move on and Penn State has most of these guys move on, then that enhances this conversation of this rivalry that is building. On the other hand, if Oklahoma State, if they have 5 dudes wrestling, if only a couple of them win, not a good look. If Penn State wins 6 of 7 and Oklahoma State wins 2 of 5, not a good look. So I do think that at the end of the day, this isn't necessarily going to amount to which team's going to be more successful. But I think it does give us a little peek behind the curtain to see what the training is going to be like in Stillwater as opposed to the training at Penn State. The training at Penn State has been happening for, almost a decade now. But David Taylor was a massive part of that, as was Jimmy Kennedy. So I'm pretty confident that Oklahoma State does have the wrestling room, the coaching, the developmental aspects throughout the course of the season to make a run at a national title. But these coaches representing both universities to some degree is going to give us a direct understanding of what the competition in the room is going to be like, what the training is going to be like, and how Oklahoma State Cowboys could respond to having all of this next level training that they're able to get. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. We got to go check out the Cowboy baseball taking on Baylor because there was already a massive upset today. BYU skunked Arizona State, one of the best offenses in the Big 12, had one runner touch second base all day. So shout out to BYU pitching staff. I'm not sure how deep they go. After that, don't know what their bullpen looks like, but the 2 dudes that threw this morning, they threw an absolute gem, and Arizona State couldn't do anything about it. So Big 12 tournament's already off to some chaos. The bipolar Big 12 strikes in yet another sport. Anywho, that's all we're going to have this one. As you always know, God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. I'm very, very happy that you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike button if you didn't like it. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there. You're everything that makes this thing go. Appreciate you. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. Alrighty, y'all. Later, my taters.